Most people believe their thoughts are trapped inside their heads, bouncing around like echoes in a room. But that's an illusion born from years of conditioning. The truth is, your mind is not contained within your skull. It is a field, an energy, a broadcasting and receiving mechanism that stretches beyond your physical form. Every thought you have, every emotion you hold, sends out electromagnetic signals that interact with the quantum field, the invisible force of potential that surrounds everything. And when your mind becomes coherent, when your brain and heart move in harmony, you no longer just interpret reality. You begin to influence it. You see, the human brain operates like a tuning device, interpreting signals from this field of infinite possibility. But most people operate on subconscious programs, memories, traumas, habitual thoughts that keep them locked into predictable, repetitive frequencies. They wake up, think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, take the same actions, and as a result, they reproduce the same reality day after day. Their field is chaotic, scattered, and weak, barely registering on the map of true creation. But the moment you step into awareness and begin to observe your own thoughts, instead of unconsciously living them, the game changes. You move from being a victim of circumstance to a participant in creation. A strong mind doesn't just resist external influence, it bends reality. It generates a frequency so coherent, so clear, that it begins to collapse probability into form. Quantum physics tells us that particles exist in a state of pure potential until they are observed. The observer effect is not just a scientific phenomenon, it's a spiritual responsibility. When your mind is aligned with clarity and intention, when you're no longer broadcasting the noise of survival-based emotions like fear, anger, and guilt, you begin to observe reality into existence in a very deliberate way. You are no longer living from the program. You are writing it. The average person has around 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same as the day before. These repetitive patterns are electromagnetic signatures that send a steady signal into the field. Keep giving me more of what I already have. That's why change feels so hard for most people. They are chemically addicted to the familiar. But when you begin to consciously direct your thoughts and elevate your emotional state, you start creating a new signal. One that doesn't match your past, but aligns with your future. Imagine your mind like a laser. Scattered light doesn't penetrate, it disperses. But when the light becomes focused and coherent, it can cut through steel. That's what happens when you discipline your thoughts. When you replace the static noise of worry and self-doubt with clear intention and elevated emotion, the field responds to coherence. It responds to intention. It responds to who you are at your most aligned state, not just what you want in your desperation. Most people try to change their lives by manipulating matter with matter. They work harder, struggle more, push against resistance. But this is an outdated model of transformation. The new model is energetic. When you shift your energy, your thoughts, your feelings, your frequency, you initiate change at the invisible level. This is not magic. It's biology, it's physics, it's the language of consciousness. A strong mind knows that everything physical was once non-physical, and therefore, the blueprint of anything you desire already exists in the field. You don't have to create it, you just have to align with it. A coherent brain emits a powerful electrical signal, but a coherent heart adds magnetism to that signal. When your thoughts and emotions are no longer in opposition, when you're not thinking abundance but feeling lack, your energy becomes unified. That's when the signal becomes strong enough to influence reality. The field begins to mirror back to you the internal state you've chosen. People may not understand why they're drawn to you or intimidated by you. They feel your certainty, your calm intensity. You become a presence, something that vibrates beyond logic. But coherence doesn't happen by chance. It's trained. It's earned through presence, meditation, breathwork, and the daily discipline of inner observation. You have to break the addiction to familiar emotions. You have to learn how to sit with the chaos of your mind without running. Only then does the field begin to reorganize itself around a new signal. You, the real you. Not the conditioned personality, but the consciousness behind it. When your internal world becomes more real than your external circumstances, you've crossed a threshold. You've exited the mechanical reality of matter and entered the fluid domain of energy. In this space, creation becomes effortless, not because you're forcing it, but because you are it. You have tuned your mind into the frequency of the life you desire, and in doing so, you've become a generator, broadcasting a field so coherent, so resonant, that it no longer seeks validation or proof. It simply attracts, organizes, and manifests. We are emotional beings first, logical beings second. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning, we are flooded with sensations, some rooted in the present moment, most recycled from the past. These emotional patterns become the anchors that keep us tied to an identity we didn't consciously choose. To build a mind so strong it terrifies people, you must learn how to take command of the emotional programs that run beneath your awareness. Emotional reconditioning is not about becoming numb or detached. It's about sovereignty. It's about no longer allowing past emotions to dictate future possibilities. Most people think with their emotions. They believe that if they feel something intensely, it must be true. But feelings are not facts. They are feedback. They are records of previous experiences stored in the body as chemical signatures. Every time you replay a painful memory, your body relieves the emotion as if it's happening now. That means your physiology, your brain chemistry, your energy field, everything begins to align with an outdated reality. You're not living in the present, you're reacting to the past. And as long as your emotional state is dictated by yesterday, your mind cannot build a new tomorrow. To reclaim mental sovereignty, you must break the cycle of emotional dependency. Emotional dependency is the unconscious attachment to certain feelings, even if they are destructive, because they are familiar. Anger, guilt, shame, anxiety, victimhood. These are addictive emotional states. The body becomes accustomed to the chemical rush they bring, and the mind invents narratives to justify their continued presence. But a strong mind recognizes these patterns for what they are, anchors, and it doesn't try to destroy them with force. It transcends them with awareness. Awareness is the key to emotional reconditioning. You cannot change what you are not willing to observe. The moment you witness a familiar emotional response, without automatically reacting to it, you've interrupted the pattern. You've created a gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap lies your power. The power to choose a different emotion, a different thought, a different energy. At first, this feels unnatural. The body will resist. It will crave the old feelings like a drug. But with repetition and consistency, the new emotional pattern begins to imprint itself onto your nervous system. This is where elevated emotions come in. Gratitude, love, joy, inspiration, and peace are not just pleasant feelings. They are high-frequency states that signal safety and expansion to the body and brain. When you deliberately evoke these emotions, regardless of your external circumstances, you begin to recondition your body to believe that a new future is not only possible, but already unfolding. The body stops bracing for danger. The mind stops predicting worst-case scenarios. Your field begins to shift from incoherence to order, from survival to creation. Most people believe they must wait for something external to change before they can feel better. But that is the old model of reality, cause and effect. Emotional reconditioning flips that model. You become the cause. You feel elevated first, and the effect is that your reality begins to change. This is not delusion, it's calibration. You are aligning your inner world with the frequency of the reality you wish to experience, and in doing so, you create a new set of conditions for your outer world to reflect. Mental sovereignty means you no longer outsource your emotional state to the behavior of others. It means you stop seeking permission to feel empowered. It means you become immune to chaos not by denying it, but by becoming larger than it. People will feel that. When you refuse to react emotionally to drama, when you maintain equanimity while others spiral into reactivity, it unsettles them. Your calm becomes a mirror that reflects their own lack of control. That's why a strong mind terrifies those who are still slaves to their emotions. They cannot manipulate what they cannot destabilize. This doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It means you transmute them. You feel them fully, but you don't identify with them. You allow sadness to move through you, but you do not become it. You observe anger arise, but you do not act from it. This is mastery. This is the beginning of emotional freedom. Through daily practice, whether through meditation, breathwork, journaling, or intentional silence, you begin to retrain the body to trust new emotions. You teach your nervous system that it is safe to relax, safe to dream, safe to be present. And as you consistently elevate your emotional baseline, the quality of your thoughts naturally rises to match. You don't have to force positive thinking. It becomes the byproduct of an emotionally coherent state. Your mind stops working against you. Your thoughts and emotions move in harmony, creating a new internal signature that the quantum field cannot ignore. Your brain is not fixed. It's not a static organ destined to replay the same loops of thought, emotion, and behavior forever. It's plastic, adaptable, and impressionable. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience, is the key to personal transformation. But here's the truth: experience alone doesn't change the brain. It's conscious experience paired with intention, repetition, and emotional intensity that leaves a lasting imprint. If you want to build a mind so strong it terrifies people, you must become the architect of your neural blueprint. You must no longer allow external conditions or past memories to etch pathways in your brain without your permission. Every thought you think is a neural signal. When you think a thought repeatedly, you fire the same neural circuits over and over again. Fire together, wire together. That's how habits are formed. Over time, this repeated firing becomes your default mode. You don't even have to try. The brain does it automatically. This is how most people live, trapped in a neurological feedback loop of their past. They say they want to change, but they are literally thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and behaving the same way every single day. Change under these conditions is impossible. To rewrite the neural blueprint, you must break the loop. You must become aware of your most habitual thoughts, the ones that arise before you even notice, and interrupt them. Awareness is the first stage of rewiring. You cannot change what you are unaware of. Once you start observing your internal dialogue, your doubts, your complaints, your judgments, you bring unconscious patterns into the light. And what you bring into the light, you can begin to reconstruct. Repetition is your tool. Just as old thought patterns were formed through repeated activation, new thought patterns must be installed the same way. But it's not just about saying affirmations or thinking positive thoughts. Surface level repetition without emotional charge is weak. The brain rewires most effectively when thoughts are accompanied by elevated emotion. When you visualize a new version of yourself and feel the gratitude or excitement as if it's already true, your brain begins to encode that imagined experience as a real one. The more vividly you do this, the more real it becomes to your nervous system. Your body doesn't know the difference between an emotion created by an external event and one created by your mind. So when you sit quietly, close your eyes, and fully embody the feeling of confidence, clarity, abundance, or strength, even if your current circumstances don't reflect it, you are conditioning your brain to expect a new reality. Over time, those neural pathways become more familiar than the old ones. You are literally becoming someone new, not metaphorically, but biologically. This is how identity shifts. The person you are today is not who you are. It's who you've rehearsed being. It's the sum of your repeated thoughts and emotional patterns. If you've practiced feeling unworthy, anxious, or angry for years, then of course those feelings seem normal. But they are just rehearsed states, and anything rehearsed can be unrehearsed, rewritten, and replaced. Rewriting the neural blueprint also means changing your relationship with the environment. Most people live as if the environment is more real than their mind. They wait for a change in the outer world to initiate a change in their inner world. But a strong mind flips this script. It doesn't wait for results to feel successful. It feels successful to create results. It doesn't wait for proof to believe. It believes so deeply that proof must appear. This reversal is what terrifies others, because when someone begins to operate from internal cause instead of external effect, they become unpredictable, limitless, and self-directed. The mind, when rewired properly, no longer reacts, it creates. And it doesn't just create randomly, it creates with precision. You are not just thinking new thoughts, you are training your brain to live in a future that hasn't happened yet. And the more you mentally and emotionally rehearse this future, the less attached you become to the conditions of the past. Those old neural circuits begin to wither through disuse. They lose their charge. You stop identifying with the old story because the brain is no longer wired to tell it. This process requires persistence. The brain resists change. It clings to the known, even when the known is painful, because the unknown feels unsafe. But the unknown is where growth lives. When you consistently override the impulses to think, feel, and behave like the old self, you push your brain into new territory. You begin to install a new internal architecture, one built not on fear, memory, and reaction, but on vision, belief, and design. Every time you sit in meditation or focused thought and visualize the life you're building, you are lighting up new circuits in the brain. You are reinforcing new connections and weakening the old ones. Eventually, the old wiring is overridden, and the brain no longer has access to the emotional triggers of your past. It becomes easier to think empowering thoughts than disempowering ones, not because you're forcing it, but because your brain has adapted. It has been rewired to support the mind you've chosen to become. Power doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't need to. In fact, the most formidable minds operate in stillness, in calm, and in quiet precision. They are not loud. They are not reactive. They are not chasing validation. And that's what makes them so unnerving to others. When you build a mind strong enough to operate independently of chaos, independently of praise, and independently of external affirmation, you don't just become powerful, you become unpredictable. And when people can't predict or categorize you, they become unsettled. You become invisible to the emotional hooks they're used to exploiting. This is the art of mental invisibility. Mental invisibility begins the moment you stop identifying with your ego. The ego craves attention, recognition, and control. It wants to be right, to be seen, to be understood. But the strong mind doesn't need these things. It's moved beyond the reactive identity of self-importance. It no longer uses conflict to feel alive. It doesn't engage in drama to feel relevant. It recognizes the futility in proving anything to anyone. And so it becomes quiet, not out of weakness, but because it understands that silence holds more power than words ever could. To be mentally invisible is not to disappear from the world. It is to stop playing the games others expect you to play. It is to move with such inner coherence and emotional clarity that people can't find an edge to push against. Their projections, manipulations, and assumptions fall flat because there's no matching frequency in you. You've stopped reacting, and in doing so, you've denied them control. Most people operate on unconscious programming. They throw emotional bait into conversations to elicit predictable reactions. When you no longer bite, when you remain composed and unattached, you short-circuit their scripts. There's a quiet power that radiates from someone who has trained their mind to no longer need to be understood. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your choices, and stop trying to be liked, you begin to emit a different energy. It's the energy of certainty. Not arrogance, just deep-rooted clarity. That clarity becomes intimidating to those who derive their power from control or chaos. They don't know what to do with someone who isn't playing by the usual emotional rules. Mental invisibility is a result of internal mastery. It comes from doing the inner work no one sees. The work of sitting with your discomfort instead of avoiding it. The work of detaching from narratives you once believed defined you. The work of removing yourself from emotional entanglements that once validated your wounds. When you stop reacting, people lose their ability to define you. You become undefined, fluid, present, and completely self-governing. There's an elegance in not needing to respond to every insult or engage in every disagreement. The mind that has achieved this level of discipline is no longer triggered by opposition. because it doesn't depend on agreement. It stands alone. This doesn't mean it's isolated. It means it's sovereign. And sovereignty is a rare and intimidating trait. When people encounter someone who cannot be guilted, provoked, or emotionally manipulated, they don't see indifference. They see mystery. They see someone who knows something they don't. And that unknowability becomes a source of power. A mind that is invisible is not absent. It is simply untouchable. It doesn't seek center stage. It doesn't fight to be heard. It doesn't need applause. It creates from the shadows, influences without force, and moves with intention. This kind of mind changes rooms without speaking a word. It alters dynamics with presence alone. And it does this not by trying to dominate others, but by being so in tune with itself that it renders external influence irrelevant. You can't fake this kind of power. It doesn't come from affirmations alone or external achievements. It comes from the deep and often painful work of breaking your own illusions. You have to dismantle the parts of yourself that still crave recognition, still seek control, still respond to fear. You have to train your nervous system to remain calm in the face of criticism, rejection, or confusion. You have to be willing to let go of needing to be right, needing to be seen, needing to be understood. That's when real power is born. Because when you need nothing, everything comes to you. People are unsettled by what they cannot read. They rely on emotional cues to assess threat, weakness, or advantage. When your mind is still, your face is calm, and your energy is neutral, and your emotions are self-regulated. They are left without a map. They can't find your buttons because you've stopped installing them. They can't pull you into conflict because you're no longer anchored in reactivity. Your silence becomes impenetrable. Your energy becomes like smooth glass. Nothing sticks. And that is when your presence begins to speak louder than your words ever could. Mental invisibility is not a performance. It is the result of deep alignment. When your mind no longer fights itself, when your thoughts no longer contradict your emotions, when your actions arise from intention instead of habit, you begin to disappear from the chaos of the collective and enter the realm of mastery. You stop being a character in someone else's script and start becoming the author of your own. The world is not as it is. The world is as you are. What you see there is not reality. It is a projection, a mirror, a reflection of your internal state of consciousness. Most people never realize this. They spend their entire lives reacting to the external world as if it's objective truth, never seeing that what they call reality is filtered through their beliefs, emotional history, traumas, and subconscious programming. To build a mind so strong it terrifies people, you must rise above this illusion. You must learn to live beyond the mirror of perception. Perception is not passive. It is an active process. The brain doesn't simply record reality like a camera. It interprets, filters, assigns meaning. And what determines that interpretation? Your conditioning, your past experiences, the emotions you've memorized, the narratives you've accepted without questioning. Two people can witness the same event and have entirely different experiences, not because of the event itself, but because of the lens they are looking through. If the lens is distorted, the view is distorted. The strong mind understands this and refuses to trust its first interpretation of reality. It questions its own perceptions before reacting to them. When you operate from a limited perception, you live in reaction. You assign blame, you judge quickly, you interpret others' actions through the filter of your own emotional pain. You don't see people as they are. You see them as you are. And this unconscious projection creates a cycle. If you believe the world is hostile, you find reasons to justify that belief. If you see yourself as a victim, every neutral event becomes another wound. Your perception becomes your prison. But when you start to observe the mind, instead of being controlled by it, everything changes. You begin to realize that most of what you call reality is just your nervous system repeating familiar sensations and labeling them as truth. If you've practiced fear, your perception will find things to be afraid of. If you've practiced anger, your mind will interpret people's actions as threats. But the moment you shift your inner state, the external world seems to shift with it. This is not magic, it's perception. When your inner lens becomes clean, reality becomes clear. Living beyond the mirror of perception means you stop trusting emotional reactivity as wisdom. Just because something feels true doesn't make it true. Emotion adds color and intensity to your perception, but it also distorts it. A strong mind knows this. It learns to feel emotion fully without allowing it to hijack interpretation. It holds space between stimulus and response. It waits. It watches. It filters every perception through presence, not programming. To rise above perception, you must first recognize its origin. Ask yourself, is what I'm perceiving right now shaped by truth or by history? Is this thought coming from my higher self or from my wounded self? Have I felt this emotion before? Am I reliving a past wound in a new disguise? The moment you ask these questions, you interrupt the pattern. You pull your consciousness out of the old feedback loop and into the now. And in the now, perception becomes a tool, not a trap. Most people resist this level of responsibility. They would rather blame others, attack the world, or seek external change. But this only deepens their dependence on perception. They become more reactive, more conditioned, more predictable. The mind that can see beyond its own perception becomes a master, not a puppet. It doesn't project, it reflects. It doesn't assume, it investigates. It doesn't judge, it understands. This clarity is terrifying to those who rely on illusion for control. They don't know how to manipulate someone who sees through the game. Living beyond perception also means no longer reacting to opinions, praise, or criticism. You see that everyone is perceiving you through their own mirror, and it has little to do with who you really are. One person may admire you. Another may despise you. Both are projecting. Neither is seeing the full truth. When you understand this, you become emotionally free. You stop living for approval. You stop shrinking in the face of judgment. You start acting from inner truth rather than external perception. This doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you become clear. You can still empathize, still connect, still receive feedback, but you no longer internalize it unless it aligns with your own discernment. You don't allow others' distorted mirrors to dictate your self-worth or your direction. You've stepped outside the hall of mirrors and into reality. Not the reality shaped by trauma, ego, or fear, but the one shaped by presence, purpose, and conscious awareness. When you live beyond perception, people can feel it. They sense that they cannot box you in, label you, or predict your responses. You become fluid, yet grounded. You become unshakable, not because you resist, but because you see. You don't need to fight illusions when you no longer believe in them. That is the ultimate mental power, not dominating others, but transcending the false self that was constantly reacting to them. The more you remove the filters, the clearer the mind becomes. The clearer the mind, the more aligned your actions. And the more aligned your actions, the more deeply you step into the life that was always waiting for you just beyond your perception. To build a mind so strong it terrifies people is not to cultivate intimidation through force, arrogance, or control. It is to become untouchable through deep inner mastery. It is to rise above emotional reactivity, to rewire the neural architecture of your identity, to detach from egoic patterns, and to move through the world with calm, silent precision. It is to anchor yourself in a reality that exists beyond perception, where your thoughts are no longer dictated by memory, your emotions no longer governed by circumstance, and your identity no longer defined by others. When you regulate your inner world with such unwavering discipline that the external world loses its grip on you, you become a force beyond comprehension. You don't need to speak loudly because your presence communicates certainty. You don't need to argue because your clarity dissolves confusion. You don't need to prove because your alignment is proof itself. In a world conditioned to seek power outside of itself, true strength, internal, still, and self-originating, is deeply unsettling. And that is what makes it so powerful. Because the mind that no longer conforms, reacts, or seeks, rewrites the rules of reality itself.